Hey guys, welcome to the Friday night farm stream here on the Rowan Ridge Farm YouTube channel. We're doing something a little bit different tonight, so I ask that you bear with me, making some improvements, and also this is going to be a different type of stream than what I have done in the past. So I just want to give that little caveat, partly why I'm running a little bit late. So tonight, you guys may have seen that recently I did a video reacting to some remarks that Matt Walsh made about farming, and specifically with the component of immigrant labor and how that impacts with the world of farming based on a situation that was he was commenting on that was going on out in Idaho. And somewhat surprisingly, that video kind of took off, and I had a few things that I wanted to add beyond that, but I figured rather than doing a bunch of short edited videos about that, because I have a bunch of other things in the queue, I thought it might make more sense to just do a live stream and we can go through the video and I will give you the nuts and bolts of some of the arguments that I can see on my end from what I know and from what I've experienced, and to kind of correct the record, because I like to take advantage of opportunities not just to roast Matt Walsh, because I think that the reality is most people really don't understand farming. And I mean that from a standpoint of I know that I did not understand any of these factors that are involved in farming until I started doing this myself 5 years ago. And then from that point, a lot of this stuff now seems so obvious that you would trip over it if you weren't paying attention. So I want to kind of try to pick some of this stuff apart because it is in the public dialogue a little bit. And one of the things that I keep coming back to when I'm talking about kind of the business model that we all are working on when it comes to farming, education is a big part of that. And it's not just enough to produce a quality product at a reasonable price or even at a outrageously expensive price, the way I see it, but we also have to be educators and be able to communicate to people why we're doing what we're doing and the, you know, impacts of that in a larger scale that fits into people's world. And so there's a lot of people that watch Matt Walsh. I am not one of them, although I used to watch some of his stuff when I was still blissfully ignorant of what Daily Wire kind of represents and some of their narratives that I don't really have a ton of use for at this point. But anyways, we'll dig into that stuff momentarily. But first of all, I want to start by giving, and part of the reason why my camera is a little bit different tonight, we're not in 4K, we're only in HD, so I apologize to any of you who are really big on 4K streams. Normally I do a 4K stream with my Panasonic GH5, and I have to sit back a little further and it's harder for me to interact with the computer. Tonight, since I'm going to be reacting to a video here on YouTube, I need to be within reach of the computer. But we have actually been growing recently on this channel, and I want to thank you guys because number one, we've added over 100 subscribers in the last month, which is big for me. I am very grateful to think that there are people who are interested in spending time here with us and hearing my thoughts and sharing your thoughts and communicating and being part of building what we're doing as we are working to make America farmers again. Every single one of you guys who are in here participating and helping us do that, you guys are making that happen, because it's not obviously not just me sitting here and running my mouth, but also really the community that we're building around this concept and this idea. And then the other thing that I want to just note, I did not realize that we had so many members join the channel. We got a couple of new members, and I want to make sure that we take a second to shout those folks out because we have 7 members now. And initially it was, we had Northern Lightfoot, I believe, was our first member, Kiki Simon, And then, of course, my lovely wife was member number 3. And Secret Noise Pictures came in at number 4. And then just the other day, Zeb Boykin, I was on his stream a couple of weeks ago and did a video with him, and I'm a member on his channel actually. And so it was really, it touched my heart seeing that he returned the favor. And GeoGasser and Red Sky Responder are most recent members 7 days ago and 4 days ago. So I'm not going to spend too much time beating the drum, trying to help with the war chest, let's say. But I do want to mention that those memberships are very, very appreciated because those contributions help us do what we're doing and make more content. And as we get to around 10 members or so, I'm going to start doing content that is led by and directed specifically towards members. Right now, what I'm doing is for the members is you guys get the first look at everything that I publish. So when I put something out there, I'll give you guys the first crack at it, and then eventually it goes live to everybody else. But I want to give you guys at least an early peek at things while I can. So those memberships are open, a couple of bucks a month, helps us do what we are doing. And I really, really appreciate it. It's makes a very big difference on this end in terms of morale. Same thing with the subscribers. And guys, if you haven't already done this, please like the stream. I know you might feel a little bit bait and switch because I had a placeholder thumbnail in there and a placeholder title because I was on the road traveling earlier today and I was thinking about kind of what I wanted to actually talk about. And in the process of my sojourns, I was responding to comments that kept coming in on that video that I did, responding to Matt Walsh, kind of the cut down version. And it made me realize that perhaps I had not put forward my strongest possible arguments, and that there were some things that I think that Matt Walsh, some points that he raises that are valid, but I think he also misses the larger picture there. And I wanted to try to get a little bit more nuance and have a chance to talk about some of that stuff with you guys. So first of all, as everyone comes in, greetings, Patrick Bateman. Wow, that is a hell of a name. Yeah, American Psycho used to be one of my, I mean, it still technically is, although Lord of the Rings is, I know, apples and oranges, different movies, but salutations to you, sir. That's a good name, good screen name. And I appreciate you guys checking in. Give me a holler. Let me know how you guys are doing tonight in the chat. I'm going to start off with a little monologue here because I want to give everybody, one of the reasons why, and this is always a battle that any kind of content creator is always going to be going through, is are you trying to push out content that is going to attract eyeballs and bring new people in and get your info in front of new people, or are you kind of going deeper with the stuff for the people who are already here? And on a lot of my videos and live streams, if you look by percentage, for the most part, I am pretty firmly in the camp of, trying to put out a lot of farm related content, how to, nuts and bolts, my view on different farming topics. But I'm also very willing to talk about things that are a little bit more in the pop culture area of things so that we can bring more people in and try to balance that. So I'm going to be doing a little bit of both. And at some point, as the channel grows and as I am able to devote more time to this, there is going to be sort of different tracks where we're talking about things that are strictly nuts and bolts of raising pigs, as well as, hey, I was out in the barn and I was listening to, Ben Shapiro talk some nonsense and here's why he was wrong, etc. So I want to be able to kind of go back and forth and just let my hair down a little bit. And so tonight I've kind of had it been, I don't want to say stressed out, but we're trying to make up for losses in farrowing earlier in the season. The other night I planted the whole pasture. I put some posts on the channel and it was kind of it was a process. I was up till like 2 in the morning planting everything. And then of course the pigs eat half of it. And I'm not super worried about that because I know that they're just going to eat it and then it's going to grow from their droppings whenever they crap it out. So one way or the other, the pasture got planted, not plastered. The pasture got planted. Say that 10 times fast. And yeah, so we got a lot on our plate and there's spring chores and all that stuff going on, but I kind of wanted to put a finer point on some of this stuff. So Patrick Bateman, by the look of things, is that Statue of Liberty? Does that mean that you're in New York State? Uh, New York State is a nice place. A lot of my pigs actually came from New York. And Bellino's Bounty and good in Connecticut, rather be in New Hampshire. Well, we'd love to have you here. It's going to be a little rainy tonight. Hopefully get the final soak on the seeds. And then tomorrow and the rest of the weekend is supposed to be pretty nice. Secret Noise Pictures, good evening to you, and thank you so much for your membership. I came with an open can of Red Bull. And let's get into it. I'm going to jump back and forth into the chat. If you guys have questions, comments, I am obviously open to derail and go into some of that stuff and be a little sidetracked. I'm okay with that, but I'm going to try to kind of stick a little bit more on the topic here for the time being, and then we'll jump back and forth into the chat. Oh, New Jersey. Okay, New Jersey's, well, depends on where in New Jersey. I know like Sparta area like northern New Jersey. I know that area a little bit, and I got a buddy that still lives out there in Jersey, so it's good to go. All right, so before I start in on the Matt Walsh video, I will take any kind of a debate with anybody in the pop culture space when it comes to things with farming, because like I said, my job in running this YouTube channel is not just to try to provide info and commiseration and education on some level for people who are getting involved in farming, because there's a lot of other channels that are already doing that. But I think part of it is to provide education to the public and have conversations with people who may disagree. And so there is always a little bit of a risk, which I want to try to buffer that a little bit by clarifying my position and why I am kind of going in this direction. First of all, my background, there are things that I can agree and disagree with just about any group, politically, religiously, socially. So I don't really fit 100% into any one camp. And I am going to make a longer video. I know I've been talking about this for a couple of weeks. It's going to be a little bit of a longer video that is not going to be very heavily edited, but I want to talk about my personal background, how I grew up, how I got into farming, because I grew up in a household that was very strictly conservative Christian. I lived on a Christian commune, some would call it a religious cult, in Alaska for a couple of years, and had some interesting experiences out in the world that shaped my life and brought me to this point. But whenever of recently that I have brought up anything related to any critiques of the current administration, most of the people who are or were ardent supporters of Mr. Trump, there's always this, like, just like a switch turns off and it's like, oh, you said you don't like Trump, I'm just not going to listen to any arguments that you've made, rather than actually making arguments. So I want to start off by saying, and this is, I guess, directed largely towards folks that may be coming after, because I don't know how many people we're going to have in the stream. Usually we don't have massive numbers, although if you haven't already done that, please like the stream, because that'll help push this out to more people who might be in for a little bit of a debate. I actually, when I was involved in this religious commune, I was very close to being nationally ranked in Lincoln Douglas debate. So I do enjoy arguing, probably more than I should. But my thing is that if I'm going to bring up a critique to an argument, I would like something more substantial than like, your glasses are gay And so I can't believe anything that you have to say. And it's like, okay, dude, I'm sorry that I have, the glasses are kind of a bozo look. I went for that on purpose because, you know what, people may not remember much else about me. There's a million other people on YouTube that are raising pigs. But the dingus with the funny looking glasses, it sticks in your head, and then it makes it a lot easier to make thumbnails, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't mind a little bit of that. But the point is, I would like to hear arguments where I'm wrong, because a lot of times when I stick my neck out and I say, hey, this is my view on XYZ topic, occasionally people actually come back with real rational arguments, and I get an education. And so I'm not out here reacting to this video because I know more than everybody and my opinion is the only one that matters, but I'm reacting to it because I have some experience with this stuff that I think it's pretty clear that Matt Walsh and the rest of the Daily Wire staff do not have, and probably don't care to hear much about, that is really relevant to the conversation of how farms are running and how the issue of immigration, and illegal immigration at that, is actually like the canary in the coal mine. And so when the canary, I'm assuming you guys know where that expression comes from. I'm going to just uh, explain it briefly, because there was a time when coal miners worked underground and they did not have any of the equipment to sense dangerous gases that would show up when pockets were opened under the ground. The canary was brought into the coal mine in a little cage and hung up, because canaries have very sensitive respiratory systems. They're also very small. When the canary went tits up in the cage, then that meant, okay, we need to pay attention and maybe get out of here. And that was the warning sign, because the canary was sensitive to those things. And I think for a lot of what Matt Walsh is talking about, it's relevant because we should be paying attention to the immigration topic. But there's more to it than just immigrants are bad and farmers are greedy, and so we just need to pay Americans more, and then that solves all the problems. But where I am coming from a political standpoint, I voted for Trump 3 times. Technically twice. I was going to vote for him the first time, but I was actually out at Standing Rock trying to document the protest that was going on in North Dakota at the time. And so I wasn't able to get my ballot mailed in time. But I would have voted for Trump in 2016 if I had logistically been able to make everything fit. And I have to tell you, you want to see a really wild scene, being up on the hill overlooking, I don't know how many thousand people were. There's a couple, I think between 5 and 10,000 people at various times at Standing Rock. And I was there strictly out of curiosity, because I really wanted to see, like, who's telling the truth. Am I being spun from the left or spun from the right? Because it seemed fairly apparent to me that whatever was going on out there, there was something that was actually happening, and everybody was trying to make political hay out of the thing that was going on there at the protests. And I said, there has to be some truth in this. And my former wife was a flight attendant, so I was able to get out there on the, on a shoestring and take a new camera that I was playing with. I went out there, took my camera, said I'm going to test the camera out and take some pictures. And so all that to say, I'm not unfamiliar with kind of being in the middle of dicey situations where there's a lot of different perspectives, and just trying to, call balls and strikes. And there are some people that really are not willing to listen or to think about it in that direction. But personally, on a personal level, where I'm coming from, I, grew up conservative. I am Christian. I believe in Jesus. And I think that ultimately that's the answer to everybody's problems, largely speaking. And that's, I can unpack that for you guys at a later time. But that's kind of where I am, where I'm coming from. So there is not a shred of Trump derangement syndrome in my argumentation. And I feel like I have to kind of front load this a little bit, because that's the assumption that most people make when you have anything critical to say, because we spent X amount of years seeing a lot of people in media who had TDS. And so now when people who actually voted for him and supported him through everything, at great personal expense, I may add, to ourselves, maybe socially more so than monetarily, but it's worth saying that if we cannot hold our political leaders of choice, if we can't hold them accountable, then what good are they? Because ultimately, we're not here to follow politicians. We are supporting politicians who argue and claim in their promises that they have our best interests in mind. We agree on those promises and we give them our vote and allow them to govern with our consent. And that is not a small matter. So that's where I'm coming from to start this off. And I am going to do my very level best here to make the technical side of this work well, because this is the first time that I have done this. So let's give it a go.
Local news gives us this profile of a struggling farmer, which is supposed to make us feel bad about deporting illegal immigrants, because the farmer is struggling because there are no illegal immigrants to hire for slave wages. That's the gist of it. I don't mean to spoil it, but here it is. Watch.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so the Matt starts off with misrepresenting her case. Then she's not actually saying anything about illegal immigration, where she is looking to hire illegals. She's complaining about the fact that it's hard to find anybody to work these jobs, and that legal immigrants are hard to come by. So, if anything, you could say that maybe she is complaining about the way that immigration enforcement has been accomplished or done, or sort of the environment that it has created in terms of immigration at large. And that's a lot more nuanced of a point than just saying, oh, she's complaining because she just wants to hire illegals and doesn't want to pay American workers, etc. But you'll kind of hear that here as we go along.
It's been a tough year for Idaho farmers, less water, higher fuel prices, and now fewer workers in the fields. I'm your Mountain Home neighborhood reporter, Sahana Patel, speaking with a local farmer who says crackdowns on immigration enforcement has made it much harder to find help.
It's just been harder and harder and harder to find those people to work.
Bethany Gotts owns Quay's Farm in Mountain Home, a 500-acre family operation she took over after her father passed away. But now, with fewer workers, a lot of the manual labor is left up to her. She tells me she's tried hiring locally, but it's been difficult to find people willing to do the hard work.
Finding a legal American here that is going to work as hard as an immigrant is nearly impossible, and I don't know how to say that kindly or well.
She even posted job openings on Facebook, but says interest dropped quickly.
I had 7 people contact me about it, and when I sent them the description, I had no people respond.
Gott says the increase in immigration enforcement has made it harder to find migrant workers.
The community has definitely been on edge around here, and it's heartbreaking because they are living in fear here.
She says hiring undocumented workers is not an option, with serious risks for both sides.
The repercussions are too bad because, one, you're going to get fined. You have unfortunately, an employee living in fear, and I don't blame them, but they could get picked up at any moment, and then you're without an employee.
To keep her farm running, Gotts is hiring high schoolers and is now looking into the federal H-2A visa program, which allows temporary agricultural workers into the U.S.
This year, I have endeavored to spend $200,000 to build a small worker housing.
Okay, so there's a couple of things I want to point out. That this news story, they're choosing to focus on the angle of immigration because that's like red meat to throw to the audience. But the lack of water, because there's droughts going on in Idaho right now, and then the increase in the cost of inputs, that is something that makes this much more of a pressing factor, especially since one of the things that is going to come up as we hear Matt's arguments is that, well, the farmer's just greedy. How about paying more to Americans so that they can do those jobs instead of having to hire immigrants at slave wages? And one of the things I will say is that anybody, and you guys can tell me if I'm completely misrepresenting things here, but trying to hire labor is very, very difficult. And I think that there's a couple of factors at play here. Number one is the fact that with farm labor in the United States, it doesn't go anywhere. So the only people who can really make a career out of farming are going to be people who are like working in HR for Purdue or Tyson, maybe veterinary medicine. There are some career options there. But in terms of actual doing the work of raising and growing animals, the only way to have a career in that is to have enough money to be able to buy a whole bunch of land and then finance a whole bunch of buildings to get up to speed with mechanized farming. And that's something that I think we need to unpack a little bit as we go along. But the other thing is just being able to hire labor. It is more than just dollars. And this is something that I think maybe rubs people the wrong way at first, but the idea that it's just the amount that we're paying people, that's not really the issue, because the problem is that a living wage, if you're offering someone a living wage, whatever that may be in whatever locality that you're in, doesn't really go very far when you know that your living wage is not something that you can count on to actually be living down the road. Because your living wage, which I use myself as an example with what I do for my full-time occupation here as a nurse, I make, like, healthcare is a good industry from a financial standpoint, and yet my living wage has been like bottoming out over the last several months. And there's a lot more to the ability to make the economy work in terms of farming than just hiring people who are illegal or low cost immigrants, etc. There's the reality that, like, just paying more money does not get people excited to come out and work, because there is a hopelessness in the heart of most Americans, and I would argue in American workers, that it goes beyond just what my paycheck is. It just feels very futile, because no matter what your paycheck is never going to grow, no matter what job or industry. And again, I use my own self as an example because I'm in a very profitable industry with what I do in medicine. But no matter how your paycheck increases, it's not increasing faster than the costs, the inputs, the cost of living, electricity, now fuel. I just paid $4.50 today for gas. And that is probably 25 cents more a gallon than what I was paying under Joe Biden. And I'm not saying that Biden is the benchmark of all things terrible, but I mean, we were all pretty happy, or at least I was pretty happy when I voted for Trump and thought, hey, at least we got a guy in here who's not going to tank the economy. He knows a little bit about how the sausage gets made, and if nothing else, we'll get cheap energy, and that's going to help drill, baby, drill. And then here we are with $4.50 a gallon gasoline. And at the same time, more than 70% of the farmers have, and just reading some polling data, this is not comprehensive, but over 70% of farmers are not going to be able to afford all of the fertilizer that they need this year. Now, most of what's being planted right now is being planted on fertilizer that was bought last fall or last winter. So there's always going to be a little bit of a gap, a little bit of delay between the time that we hear these things and then the time that we see these things actually begin to take effect. And that is one reason where or why I think it's really important to be getting this word out to people to make America farmers again, because we need to be starting to get that ball rolling locally within our own communities in whatever way that we possibly can. Because look, I would love to be wrong and have immigration be the biggest problem that we have, but economically and food production wise, and with everything going on, there's very valid reasons for people starting to get involved and really take this stuff seriously and working together with neighbors and with other people in their community to get access to enough land to start having the capacity to produce some of their own food, which in this case, if we're talking about pigs, as it turns out, pigs produce a decent amount of fertilizer as well. And while the scale of the economy that we can, operate with and as a small farm is certainly going to be less, but it's still like if we can diffuse that, we can potentially help mitigate some of the impact. All right, let's see. I think this is a Daily Wire ad.
Okay, so she's building, and we see the housing that she's building. So she's building a small shack to house foreign third world labor so they can work for dirt cheap on her farm. What does that remind you of? Where have you heard, stop me if you've heard this one before. You're going to build a shack and then bring in workers from the third world to work your farm. What does that remind you of? No, it's actual slave labor. I mean, that's or she's trying to run an old school plantation, basically.
Okay, this is one thing that really stood out to me, because this is one of the gross misrepresentations of the whole thing here. What she is doing is she's investing for a small farm 200 grand to put in a building is not a paltry amount of money, and it's not a mud hut or a shack. Like, she's building housing, and that's a substantial amount of money, and she's doing that to be able to make use of legal immigration. And the obvious trope that he is referencing is, slave labor and, the Civil War and pre-Civil War era and how things were done at that point. But there is a group of immigrants, just like there are groups of climbing bums and ski bums who work seasonal jobs and live out of their vehicles because they're skiing, or this exists in trout fishing, this exists in climbing, it exists in skiing, and it also exists in agricultural communities where there are people who want to work jobs that have very low commitment and that enable you to, and it's typically single men who have the ability to live kind of on a shoestring and combine resources and share housing with other people. And they go through this in order to have more free time. So they spend part of the year working in a very seasonal type of industry. I used to be a climbing guide. That's how it was. You would spend the summer months guiding climbing, and then in the winter months, you went to Joshua Tree, you went to Zion, you went to Red Rock in Nevada, and you took the money that you made guiding over the summer, and you could go to Vegas and you could do all kinds of fun stuff because you were living very frugally for part of the year to make that money, and then off you go. But the point is that this is a very advantageous situation. It is not coercive. And the implication or the comparison to slave labor in the, pre-Civil War era is that this is some sort of detrimental event. And one of the things that we're going to see here, it actually, he makes the point later in the video, but we are dealing in a global economy. So the food production that is taking place, it's happening, and we're competing with, and many small farms and medium-sized farms are contracted to produce food and products for large companies that operate at a global scale. And so as a result, the farmer who is producing pork is now producing commodity pork, and they're making pennies on the dollar, which is where those of us that are selling whole hogs and doing heritage hogs and raising on pasture, we're doing everything the old fashioned way. But the pork that we're producing is not commodity pork, it's specialty pork. And if you look at the cost for a package of pork chops that you get in the grocery store compared to what it costs to get a couple of pounds of pork chops out of a whole hog that you buy from a small farmer, there's a substantial price difference, because what we're producing ultimately comes out to be more of a premium product because of the fact that it's not included in the global commodity arrangement. And so cheap labor has always been baked into the cake when we're talking about farming. And prior to farming happening at scale with Purdue, Tyson, all the evil, JBS, Cargill, Pilgrim's Pride, and some of these are poultry. I'm just kind of throwing out some big names that everybody has interacted with on some level or another. Prior to that, when farming was done more locally, you still had to have cheap labor. And guess what? The arrangement was still very similar, where you were giving room and board, shelter, and not a ton of money, which is why farms were made or broken based on the amount of kids that you could have. And in the city, they were having about half as many kids on average. And this is kind of done through the 1800s. I did a little research. I don't have all the stats right in front of me right now, but basically in the cities, families were, between 3 and 4 kids in the cities, which is still a lot of kids by today's standards. And in the country, in rural areas, through the 1800s, even into the early 1900s, from 5 to 10 kids was normal, because you needed that labor to run the farm. And that's where the generational component and the momentum that happens over time comes into play, because you're not having to start everything up with 1 or 2 people. When you have a family that's been doing this for a while, you have years of momentum, clientele built up, products that have been developed, infrastructure that's in place, and then you have the previous generation that hands a moving operating system to the next generation that has to keep it going. Which, if you think about inertia, once you're rolling that rock and it's rolling down the hill, it's a lot easier to keep that going than it is to get it started from, a position. So the idea of cheap labor being baked into the cake with farming, that has been the case literally forever. And I would love to hear an example of somewhere that cheap labor has not been baked into the cake. I mean, I know with mechanization, that mitigates some of that, but cheap labor is very much a part of farming. And at scale, when you're producing enough food to feed an entire nation, and you have a handful of small company, well, a small number of massive companies is what I'm trying to say, feeding millions and millions of people, and even their products going to other parts of the world, dude, you're in the global economy. Okay, that's just the way it is. Now, I'm all for localizing the economy, because, like I said, the reliance on immigrant labor is a canary in the coal mine. And the way things are currently set up makes immigrant labor a attractive proposition. It's like you're throwing a picnic at the beach and you're complaining because the seagulls show up. You've created an environment with the agricultural system that we have propped up, an agricultural system that I might say has donated a whole bunch of money to both sides, because they play both ends against the middle. It's just like APAC and all the other big lobbies that are ruining our lives and our society. They hedge their bets, right? They're making sure that no matter who wins an election, they know that they're going to be they're going to get taken care of. But the point is that as long as this has been going on, this has been happening, and we should be looking at why there is a system in place that creates a vacuum into which cheap immigrant labor comes, and it is so easy for them to come in and fulfill that need. The fact that they're coming in when that vacuum exists, well, why wouldn't they? Because you can come in as an immigrant and work for 5 months doing a job that has very little, like, people aren't bothering you. You're not sitting at a desk. You don't have Lois from HR complaining that, you can't wear this sticker on your hat because it's offending somebody or some nonsense like that. You're not getting atherosclerosis sitting at a desk while your eyes get burnt out by computer monitors. You're actually out there in the sun working, and you get up in the morning, you drive the tractors. You don't have to pay for the tractors. You just go out there, do the work, and then you go home. And then after 4 or 5 months of doing that, you got a bunch of money, and then you can go back to your home where that money goes a lot further. So I just principally disagree completely with the idea that what they're talking about here, constitutes anything resembling slave labor.
At least it's as close to slave labor as you can get these days under the law. And it's facilitated by, in this case now, she wants to facilitate it by these visas for agricultural workers, which is a thing that should not exist, should not be allowed. That's totally absurd. I mean, it's one thing to claim that we need to allow special visas for highly skilled workers. And I'm also opposed to that, by the way. I think we have plenty of highly skilled people here. And if you want highly skilled workers, you should hire American workers. But it's even more ridiculous to claim that we need visas for people whose specialty is what? Picking fruit off of trees? I mean, you don't even have the pretense in that case that, well, we need the best of the best. And it just so happens that, we don't have the best here, so we got to go to Asia or something.
So I just want to take a moment here, because if anything, and President Trump himself has been very open and forthright about his desire to bring in immigrants to fill higher paying jobs in the tech sector. Now, again, I give Matt credit for saying that he's not in favor of that, although the amount of people that Trump has deported, or that have been deported under President Trump, is about the same as the number of new H-1Bs that are coming to work for all the big tech companies, which are literally cobbling together the infrastructure that is going to be our AI overlord in the surveillance state that they are assembling. And that's not really a secret at this point, with the data centers and the solar farms and all of the strain that's going into the power grid. These are fairly well documented realities. But if we're going to start somewhere, I would much rather say, hey, you know what? We don't have a ton of Americans that are able and willing to do farm work. If we're going to start somewhere, let's maybe start by making sure that the people in America who are going to college and who are spending a lot of money to get degrees in computer engineering and various programming, that those are the people whose jobs are not getting supplanted by immigrant labor. Because I can tell you that nobody is really competing for literally what the gal said about, she put it out on Facebook and she had a couple of people kicking the tires and nobody actually wanted to do the job. It's not like there's Americans showing up to do these jobs and there's immigrants showing up and she's just saying, oh, forget the Americans, I'm just going to hire the immigrants because they're cheaper, thank you and have a nice day. There's a difficulty finding people in the US who want to do those jobs. And it is not because people in America are lazy, it's because where the industries that have a future and career options and possibilities are located in this country. And farming isn't something at this point, and I'm going to get to this and unpack this a little bit down the way, but the farming is not something that has optionality as a career. Whereas if we're talking about the jobs that are coming in from India, or the immigrants coming in from India, like look at Texas, it's very, 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 like, lots of Indians coming in. And when Trump was called out on this, he said, oh no, I disagree. We don't have Americans that can do this. Like, those are jobs that Americans are competing for, that are looking for, Americans are going to college to get degrees that will make them attractive in those industries, and those people are getting shut out. It's not people in the menial labor of farming. Now, I believe that menial labor and farming should lead to careers in agriculture, and that is a problem. That's a bigger problem that takes more focus and effort, that needs to be corrected. But I just want to make that point.
That's the pretense when you hear about, well, we need highly skilled workers, and it's totally bogus. But in this case, you don't even have that pretense. Look, well, you got to go 10,000 miles away to find someone who can pick fruit. If you watch this show, you know the mainstream media doesn't just report the news. They decide what you're allowed to think about. Luckily, there's a...
Okay, so they're going on. Let me see. Skip forward here.
And, you know, as I've been talking about this, you hear from some people say, well, the farmers are the backbone. We shouldn't be criticized. Okay. Yeah, we're allowed to criticize her. Like, there's no profession you can have that puts you above criticism. Sorry.
Got to agree with that point. I don't think that anybody as a farmer deserves to be exempt from critique or criticism. I think the obvious hypocrisy here that really provoked me, because I saw this before because I believe it was last Friday, you guys mentioned to me that he made this video, and I was watching it, and I kind of was like, yeah, you know, I mean, not sure how I feel about it. This was one of the things that really stood out to me and said, I have something to say. I'm going to put my oar in the water. Because, yeah, farmers definitely are not above reproach. There's room for critique of everybody. But there's obvious hypocrisy when you look at all of the big companies that we have no problem with, that are also doing this exact same thing. They are relying on cheap immigrant labor and legal immigrant, right? And Bolino's Bounty says that if people were asking for housing as a perk, I could see her justifying that. But the issue is she has the wage, but that's not enough. I would argue that the 200K should go instead to wages and not to housing. So yes, it may be that the housing is part and parcel of investing in something that will allow you to make or to have people come in legally, as I believe H2A is the classification. So if you can provide them with housing, then you're able to bring in legal immigration. And so she is trying to comply with the law in order to bring in legal immigrants in order to satisfy the issue with the labor. And hello from Arizona, Dream Killer. Good to see you here. And Zeb Boykin, I would be hard pressed to disagree with that point. There is a tremendous amount of idiocy here, but I like to pick apart some of the nuance. But yeah, this is stuff that's being done. The difference is that when Purdue or Tyson does this, nobody says anything about it, because it's not even a drop in the bucket for them to put several millions of dollars into these little cracker boxes and then stuff people into them. And they've been doing this for a very, very long time. And I'm old enough to remember when legal immigration and illegal immigration were issues that the right and the Republicans were very laissez-faire about, because they wanted to have people coming in because they needed people to work in those meat processing plants, and they needed people in there, plucking chickens for Tyson and Purdue. They needed all of that. And so the Republicans were the ones who, back in the Clinton days, before the whole, the DEI type of thing became really popular, and then everything flip-flopped, and then all of a sudden it was the Republicans were like, oh, we got to close the borders now all of a sudden, when in years past they were more than happy to keep the borders open, because that meant cheap labor for the big companies that were putting money into it. And I'm all for saying that we need to create an environment in which farming does not rely on immigration, but that means localizing our economies and making some hard choices about if we want to be involved in a global economy, because then that global economy is going to require globalism in the labor so that you can get cheap labor, but even cheap labor that is beneficial, where you have people who come in order to do that. Um, and Bellino's Bounty also says the issue with modern machinery is that the company is going out of their way to make your equipment obsolete. I know John Deere got in a bunch of trouble for that. One of many reasons why I'm very thankful that I have a Kubota. And yeah, that is a massive financial burden on any size farm. And one of the things that I want to put out here, as since I'm using the canary in the coal mine analogy a bunch, one of the things that tells me that any industry where you can't go from small to medium small to large small to medium medium, where you can't grow from a small to a large operation, and everything, that bar of entry is set so high, that is indicative of a system that is centralized and captured. Now, maybe it's captured by people that make products that we like and we don't hate them, and maybe they're not all terrible people who do all kinds of terrible things on islands, and right. But the likelihood, even all of the implications of these island visiting folk, and all the things that they get up to, the point is that our food, which is pretty important, it is a system that is completely captured. And that is why you can't start off with 10 acres and farm it really well, and then buy another 10 acres, farm 20 acres really well, and then buy 50 acres and do that, and then go to 100 acres. You either are in the game, and a lot of this has to do with the scale, of, and the machinery as well, that, the farmers that get in, they don't have the luxury of saying, hey, you know what, I'm going to do this the right way. I'm not going to sell any of my products to Purdue. I'm not going to sell to Cargill. I'm not going to sell my chickens to Pilgrim's Pride, because at the end of the day, there's like 3 companies that are buying your product. You're not selling to Billy Bob down the road and Sister Grace up the street. You're selling to one of 3 massive companies. And if they ice you out and say, too bad, well, guess what's happening to your entire land and your family and everything else? It's all getting flushed down the toilet, because everything is so incredibly centralized. And in my mind, this is the big problem with everything in agriculture, is that it is so centralized, and that means the dollars that come in from agriculture, from the big companies, those all get centralized into politicians that basically continue to prop up those systems, because all the regulations, and this is what they do with their lobbying. I mean, I know there are some of you who could probably tell in great detail how APAC does what it does. I can tell you in some level of detail what the farm bureaus do with their lobbying dollars. And basically, they get the USDA to make rules and regulations that create these hurdles that Purdue and Tyson, they're big enough that they can just step right over, no barrier, and they just keep right on cooking. Small farmers, they just smack right into the regulations, and they go out of business. And that's why since the 90s, you've had small and medium farms just fold, cash it in, and go out of business more and more and more and more and more. It's because the entire system has created this. And that it's a product of centralization, and centralization comes with a lot of niceties, because as Matt's going to talk about how, we should have everybody work at Chick-fil-A instead of working on farms because they pay more and the job is easier. You're not wrong about that. But guess what, Matt? When you get rid of immigrant labor that enables Purdue and Tyson to hire people who will come in and work for what in the United States is not a living wage, but in Jamaica or Mexico is a living wage. Well, when those people go away, then you wind up with all of the fast food industry completely going out the window, because if you're dealing with a small farmer, it's going to be like, well, I can get you a couple of hundred birds, but you're going to have to wait a few weeks. That means no chicken nuggets when you go to the drive-through. You have to wait for Bob the farmer to get the birds plucked and in the freezer, and it's much, much smaller scale, which I think would probably be better for everybody, including our health, if people consumed less and higher quality. Guys, if you haven't already done this, please like the stream. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, do that. Would love to have you around. And I do appreciate the feedback here and the conversation that we're getting here.
She's whining because she can't import cheap third world slave labor. That's what she's whining about. And we're supposed to feel bad for her? Says she can't find Americans willing to do the job. Well, here's an idea. Here's a crazy idea, okay? Pay the Americans a fair wage, and then maybe they'll work for you. If you have a job and you're having trouble finding people who are willing to do it, the first thing I would look at is the wage you're offering. That might be the problem. It's not that Americans won't work on a farm. Does anyone really believe that? Does anyone really believe that there are no Americans in Idaho who are willing to do this kind of work? No, it's that they don't want to work on a farm for the amount of money that you're paying them. And that makes sense. Okay? Because if I'm looking for a job and I can choose between monotonous physical labor with long hours on the one hand, and a job that's much easier with maybe shorter hours and pays more or even the same, I'm going to choose the latter. Obviously, that's not laziness. It's like no one is born with an obligation, with some calling, some obligation to go work on your farm. You have to convince them that that's the best option for them. And if they have another option where it's like, okay, I get to be an air.
Thanks so much, Matt. This is really genius. How come I didn't think of this? We just need to pay people more money. So the price that we are used to paying for everything, which people are struggling to pay right now, and this is with cheap immigrant labor baked into that cake. People are struggling to go to the store and buy groceries for themselves. And this is with everything being produced bare minimum in terms of quality and everything. What do you think is going to happen when we increase what we're paying the people who are producing it? I can tell you the short answer is, again, restaurants like McDonald's, Chick-fil-A, that all goes out of business and nobody is able to afford to buy the food anymore. And the problem is when it comes to what we're calling a living wage, that's one of the things that is kind of an issue here. And a lot of it, as you're probably figuring out, is rolled up into the issue of everything went from being expensive, but I was getting by, to being outrageously expensive, and I literally don't know how much longer I can keep doing any of this because of a lot of the things and the decisions that this administration has made. And rather than be honest and say, hey, you know what, maybe fertilizer that's gone through the roof and is going to be screwing the food system, the farmers, everybody for years to come, maybe $4.50 a gallon gasoline, higher than what I was paying under Biden. Maybe those are things that juice is not worth the squeeze, because if you want to pay people more money, the money has to actually be worth something. So if you give people more money, but they know that no matter how much of that money that they get, that they have to have money at a almost unfathomable scale to actually feel comfortable, like we can relax, to be able to say, okay, I'm good. I have enough money. Like I look at, my wife and I started watching Mad Men, a show about advertising agency on Madison Avenue, New York City in the 1960s, 70s, and it kind of goes through that time period. It always fills me with nostalgia because of the fact that I'm like, I hear these people going back and forth to their jobs and everybody has a nice home and a nice car. And the people who have good jobs are able to plan for the future of their children. And it's just like they take it for granted, where like yeah, my children are going to be set, because by the time I'm an old man at 40 something, I'm going to have this set up, and I'm going to buy this, and I'm going to buy that, and when I die, I'm going to have all this stuff to give my kids. And it's like, I'm struggling to pay my bills and put a roof over my kids' head, let alone myself. And that is working in an industry where I am making a living wage. And so when when that's on the radar, in the zeitgeist, if you will, of Americans, the ability to work on a farm is not going to really have much appeal, except potentially to some high schoolers. And that's all well and good to hire high schoolers, but end of the day, um, you also need reliable people who want to be there and who want to do the work. And the dollar and a living wage has to actually be going somewhere. It has to mean something where you're not worried about instability in the market and in the costs, because nuclear war may be upon us at any point in time. And you know kind of flip a coin to see what's going to happen this week. That's part of the reason that you can't just pay people more. And then also, obviously, the increase in the prices, when, like, the thing that I thought about for all the people that come up and work, as I said in the video that I made last week, my farm is relatively small. I haven't expanded it or scaled it beyond the point of what I can do, and with a little help from my family and a couple of friends at times. And so I am not going all in on trying to monetize and pay my mortgage with my earnings from my farm, because of the fact that labor is both unreliable and very expensive. And I don't want to find myself in this situation and having this kind of a hit piece made about me. I mean, I wouldn't really bother me if Matt Walsh wants to take a dump on me, figuratively. Go ahead and clip that. In terms of commentary and narrative construction by people on the in the Trump cultists, if you will, I'm okay with that. But the reality is, I'm very aware of the need to grow, but not grow too big, because if I grow too big, then all sorts of other costs and risks come into the picture when I need additional labor. So I'm running a 10-acre farm, not a 500-acre farm. And so a little bit of a different story. Well, kind of went off the rails there. Forgot what exactly I was going to say, but I'll let Matt talk for a second and I'll come back to it.
Air conditioning, and the hours are shorter. It's not as demanding. Like, I'm sitting down for part of, like, whatever. And the money is the same or even better. Of course I'm going to take that. Why wouldn't I take that? Easier job for more money. Huh. I could do a harder job for less or an easier job for more. Which one am I going to go with? Anyone in their right mind would take the job. Now, the only way you take the harder job for less money is if you're really passionate about it specifically, or if you see it as a stepping stone into a career. I mean, there are cases where it makes sense actually to take the job for less money that's harder, if that's the case. If, like, you're passionate about it, you want this to be your career. But menial farm labor probably isn't going to be a stepping stone into a career. I mean, it could.
So, first of all, the thing I was winding up to say was just the fact that it is really not a good commentary on our economic policy that people come into our country and can work for 4 or 5 months and then go back to their country with our dollars and live like kings, where people in our country who make 2 to 3 times that amount that these menial laborers are making, they make 2 to 3 times that amount, and we're lucky if we get to take a week off in the summer. That sounds like more of a bigger problem with the economic system and instability in the market, and doing things like foreign policy that leads to printing a whole bunch of money to deflate the currency that was already pretty inflated, to make your dollar weak so that people at home don't have anything to show for their living wages that they're making, and then not really going too hard in the paint on the better jobs that Americans are competing over with Indian immigrants. Oh no, that's total. We don't have skilled workers. We can't do that. But you want to get all wrapped around the axle about people who find it profitable to come and pick fruit in our country when nobody else is competing for those jobs. It just seems like a willful blindness towards the reality of the situation. Now, the point that Matt is making here about the fact that there really is not a future in agriculture. Again, we're back to the canaries in the coal mine. Like, everybody takes for granted the food industry. And I say this not from a place of judgment or talking down. Like I said at the very beginning of this video, like, that was me 5 years ago. I only really started to understand this, and I'm still learning a ton. So again, if you guys have questions, comments, and things that you think I am missing, by all means, put it in the chat if you're live here watching now, or drop a comment if you're watching afterwards, and I'd be happy to engage and discuss this rationally further. Assuming that you have an actual argument and you're not just going to insult my stupid face or my glasses, which, I mean, nice burn, but that's not actually an argument. And so the fact that we can take for granted our food system, and it doesn't ever occur to anybody that, hey, the fact that we can't have somebody start a small farm and sustain that without all of these other manipulations of the system, which, yes, importing outside labor because it's cheaper, I would say that's not a good thing. But why is that? And why is that so necessary in order to make things work? And if that was not necessary, then you wouldn't have literally every other farm that is able to stay open and be profitable doing that. It's just they do it a little bit better, and their security and their drones do a little bit better job of keeping out the intrepid investigative reporters, which eventually they get in there. And there have been many lawsuits against all these massive mega farms for the way that they do business and their treatment of workers, the pay, the overworking, the lack of support and resources, all of that stuff. This is not an issue that is unique by any stretch to small farms. This is just baked into the cake. This is baseline for big ag, but we don't take into our thought, like, hey, if we don't have a fertile business environment and a fertile climate for people to get involved in farming who have the capacity and the land and the desire, and we have small farms just folding for the last 40 years, 30 years, that means that we are literally killing the golden goose, and we're sawing off the branch that we're sitting on. And that's kind of my larger point with all of this. Whether Matt Walsh realizes this and is just being disingenuous on purpose, or whether potentially he just doesn't know, like so many people don't know, that's kind of a problem. There needs to be a future in agriculture, and right now, if you want to have a future in agriculture, the only way to have a future for an American who needs an American scale of living wage, which, let's just say, 65,000 a year, I mean, give or take a little bit depending on where you are in the country. There's some places where maybe it's 75, 85, there's some places where it's maybe like 55, 65, but somewhere in the neighborhood, let's just say 65,000 a year. If you need to find a career in agriculture doing that, you're not going to find that anywhere unless you're working for one of the massive companies that we've all everybody knows, like the food at McDonald's is not nutritious. We all know that the crap at the grocery store, will eat it and it tastes like meat, but we all know that it's raised and processed under very subpar conditions that we don't really want to think about. We just want to enjoy it for what it's worth, and then let it go from there. Nobody's really thinking about those facts. And in my mind, this is one of the reasons why I have to take Matt to the woodshed for this, is the fact that this was a perfect platform and a perfect opportunity to say, hey, you know what? This system that we're dealing with really sucks. Maybe RFK could spend a little bit less time about worrying that anti-Semitism and white supremacy are the biggest concerns that we have for the health of our nation, and maybe think about how we could support politicians like Thomas Massie, who is literally the one person in Washington who is actually trying to make things better for small farmers and to crack open the regulatory stranglehold that the USDA has on farmers, where they will come and they will kick down your door if you are some Amish guy selling raw milk in Pennsylvania to a handful of people who live in your community, can walk into your barn, can see how you're operating things, what you're feeding your animals, how you're caring for them. They got no problem kicking down that guy's door or making a hit piece on this, woman with her relative. I mean, 500 acres is a lot bigger than my farm on 10 acres, but believe me, they have no problem making examples out of these people, but nobody wants to call into question the system that is being propped up by the regulations that make it so that a family can't start a farm. Like, think about this, okay? I have a 10-acre farm, and if I do everything really well and I reinvest all my profits, imagine that, having profits, right? If I invested all my profits in building the infrastructure, better fences, better animals, better feeders, more grain bins, and I'm doing a lot of this stuff on a shoestring already, but like, you would think that if I'm making good choices and I have a good product, that I would be able to expand and then be able to pass this on to my kids, where they would have a farm to then take the next generation and run. But that's the reason why, like, you can't get there from here. It's just like I'll use an example of dairy because I know these numbers from dairy because I talk to people that are involved in dairy. Like, in order to have a dairy farm that is going to operate commercially, you have to have 1,200 is the last number, but 1,200 cows alive, well, lactating, and getting milked and fed. That is the minimum that you have to have in order to stay in business and just like not drown. That's not like going on vacation, sipping Mai Tais on the beach somewhere. That's like getting up in the morning to go do it again. 1,200 animals. There's no way to get from there to here, and it is almost entirely due to regulatory pressure that has been set up and maintained by the government, and also foreign policy and economic policy that, again, squeezes the farmers, knocks mom and pop out of business, and then who comes and buys up the land, who buys up that market share? The big guys that are donating to the campaigns of the various politicians who go out there and they claim, like Trump claiming to be, oh, I'm out here for the farmers out there in Iowa. And the reality is they have the picture that looks like a farm, but it's not small farms. It's big farms that are as evil as big PH farms, pharma. It's just as bad, if not worse. And they all work together. And ironically, the one point that I have made many times, and I will make one more time, the reason why they can sell their meat for so cheap is because of the fact that they're not making their money on pork chops. They're making their money on pharmaceuticals that they have access to, because this rotten, incestuous relationship between these industries, it overlaps so much, and then the regulation keeps everybody else out of the game, so they're free to collect the profits. And thank you, Lord of the Ree. Matt is trying to steal my look, although he's still kind of like dabbling. He hasn't committed to it. He's still got the black glasses. When you go full white frame, that's where you get it's committed. And the funny thing is, I've had a few people kind of roast me a little bit for it, which I totally don't mind, because it's meant to be something that is memorable. That's not why I got these glasses. It was just kind of something that I figured I would try, and the fact that they're different didn't hurt anything. But I get a lot of people that compliment them, so I feel like it's, you kind of have to embrace the risk and just go for it. And good evening, Mr. Lightfoot. Thank you for being here. You are illuminating, both literally with the light here, and figuratively. Your presence in the chat is illuminating as always, and we appreciate it. Yeah, the tortoiseshell as well, except the tortoiseshells, they don't pop so much. Northern Lightfoot says, my ancestors, one of whom signed the Declaration of Independence, did own slaves. Interesting. Were their name Lightfoot as well? I don't know all the signers of the Declaration of Independence, but yeah, I mean, not a ton has changed in that regard, because I think that we're still dealing with an industry that prioritizes something roughly equivalent to, you know, the colonial era of slavery. But um, you know, again, Matt Walsh is not going to call that out because politically that's not profitable for their venture. And again, one last thing. Well, no, not, this is not the last thing at all. This is just one more thing I should say. Um, oh, geez. Lori Lightfoot. Um, yeah, the it's that much more of a slap in the face, and one of the reasons why I have jettisoned any support that I had for Trump was the extent to which he is going to unseat Thomas Massie, when Thomas Massie is the one guy who actually is trying to open things up with the Prime Act. And I am going to make a properly edited video about the Prime Act and how that could potentially change things for small farms, which it's still an uphill battle. The difference is it's an uphill battle that now we have, you know, the ability to put on boots to fight the uphill battle instead of being asked to go in flip-flops and fight the uphill battle. But every little bit does help. But Trump's position on Thomas Massie is just, that really stuck in my craw. That really stuck in my craw, because he's the one guy that's pushing some of the things that Joel Salatin has talked about. And so, you know, to kind of um, pass off a little credit to Joel Salatin, who's been writing about it in books like Everything I Want to Do Is Illegal, where he goes into excruciating detail about how penalizing and how bad the regulatory side of the agricultural industry is, and how it screws small farmers and makes it so that you can never go and start your own farm to produce a product for people that you are going to see face to face. You can't do that. All you can do is go and show up and buy the chickens that Purdue processes with their effectively slave labor. You can buy that, as much of that as you want, but if you want to start an operation where you do it the right way and you actually have a chance to advocate for your own product and say, well, you know what, I'm paying everybody here a living wage, so I need to set these prices. Too bad, you're out of business, because you know, the regulations are just going to smother you in relatively short order. And like, it's hard enough to stay in business even if we didn't have regulatory pressure. But the fact that the regulatory pressure is so disproportionately penalizing to small farmers, it's just like, it's not even close. It's not even close. Oh, Patrick Bateman, where'd you go? I was wondering where you went. And guys, if you haven't already, like the stream, please. Like the stream and subscribe to the channel so we get this out there, because more people need to understand why it is that the farms around them are not making money and they're going out of business and they're selling to put data centers on their farmland. It's because you can make a lot more money with a data center than you can farming, no matter how much you charge for your products, no matter how much you pay your labor. But there's a lot to that conversation, and it has to do with regulation and legislation and lobbying groups that control all of the politicians, and certainly control or have a very strong influence on Mr. Trump and the Republicans in general, because most of the agricultural lobbying bureaus and lobbying was generally one of, you know, they generally were more in line with the GOP, and they still donate to both. So I'm not saying that it's strictly a problem of the GOP, but they have always been GOP aligned. And the whole idea that, like, when, you know, Trump goes to Iowa and says, oh, I'm supporting the farmers, like, what he's actually doing is supporting the regulations that are screwing small farmers and making it so that Purdue and Tyson and Monsanto can wreak havoc on our health and our food system and our agriculture, so that all the food is all centralized in one group of very powerful, rich, millionaires and billionaires' hands, so that when they say, hey, you know what, we're not going to produce chicken wings anymore, and you guys have to just suck it up because we've decided that it's not safe to run this factory or to ship this or to produce that, and we lost a little money, we don't like it anymore. Guess how many chicken wings you're going to be eating? 0 chicken wings, because there's only one place to get them, and it's that one big company that produces literally everything. It's a terrible idea. Lord of the Rings says, I don't like some of Massey's takes, but I really like a lot of Massey's takes. I hope he accepts Jesus one day. I do too. I don't know a ton about Massey in terms of his position on Jesus, but I would say that for all of our political leaders and everybody, including all of you guys watching, I mean, we all need him. And it's by the grace of God that we're here in the first place. So the least we could do is show some contrition, I guess, in light of all that. Bolino's Bounty says, I'm a firm believer that generally speaking, regulation exists only to gatekeep business. It's not about helping people. Could not have said it better myself. That is exactly right. And it's actually making our country much less safe. I mean, if you think about it from a national security standpoint, again, back to the canary in the coal mine, right? Okay, from a national security standpoint, let's say you're an evil group of people who like to do false flags and PSYOP, and you're located relatively somewhere in the Middle East. I'm not going to go beyond that in the description of who I might be referring to here, but let's just say you're trying to really stick it to the American people and our country because you needed leverage, and maybe, you know, the island thing just wasn't working out anymore and you needed to go a different route and really upset the people. You know, it wouldn't take that much to disrupt the balance of the food and the farming because of the fact that there's only a couple of companies. So if you kind of whack a couple of them and you take out their kneecaps, then nobody's eating, because it's not like people can just say, oh, you know what, Purdue's out of business, or Purdue shut this down. I'm going to go down the street to so-and-so, and I'm going to have, you know, McDonald's is going to say, oh yeah, we can't do business with Purdue anymore. I guess we're going to have to go people locally and keep the chicken nuggets coming. Under no circumstances you could kneecap everything in our country in a frighteningly short amount of time with a little bit of malintent, because of the fact that everything in our food system is so centralized. Again, think back to the pandemic and when things got rationed and things went off the shelves. And for a very long time here in the New England, none of the pizza joints had chicken wings for over a year. There were no chicken wings. You couldn't get chicken wings because it was too expensive, because you had to get them shipped in from somewhere way out of the way, because none of the companies were sending chicken wings out this way, because some of the companies that own the processing plants, they just decided and said, oh yeah, we're not going to be doing that. And that is completely unacceptable, both just from a general freedom standpoint of, hey, businesses should be able to produce what people want within reason, as long as it's not, you know, depraved and detrimental. But just from a national security standpoint, we could go from being on the brink of civil war to being just absolutely off the rails and a burning dumpster fire in a very short period of time, given the fact that it's like everything is so centralized. It makes everything at much greater risk. And guys, if you haven't already done so, please like the stream. And if you're not already subscribed here, please do subscribe. If you're not Farm, says hello, I didn't think you were going live. YouTube did not send the notification this evening. Well, to be fair, I would claim that I'm shadow banned because I talk about things that are unpopular, but I don't know that. I think that might be a little inflating of my own ego. So I will just say that it took me a little while to get the stream put together where I knew what I was going to be talking about, and I was traveling, so I didn't get the thumbnail made until like 2 minutes after the stream was supposed to have started. So there we go. Lord of the Rings says, I don't eat chicken wings. I exclusively eat Dino Nuggets. Well, Dino Nuggets have their place too. And to be fair, I want to just point out, I probably should have said this a little bit earlier because there's not a lot of people, I don't think, that are going to make it to this point in watching this. Well, maybe they do. And if you do, God bless you. My most sincere congratulations to you for having the tenacity to stand, to deal with my ranting here. But I think that industrial ag, factory farming, the big evil companies, I think they have their place, right? I don't think that it should be illegal to for Purdue to exist. What I think should be stopped legally are, number one, the regulatory nonsense that punishes anybody who wants to compete with big ag. Because look, Purdue and Tyson, they still would dominate the market, even if I could produce things however I wanted, and all of you guys could as well. They would still dominate the market because they're big and people like chicken nuggets. Like, not everybody is going to quit going to McDonald's and say, no, I'm only going to buy whole pasture raised, organic, GMO free, non soy fed, free range chickens. No, people are still going to want to eat their chicken nuggets. It's just a matter of having the space to create viable alternatives so that people can actually make educated decisions. And we are getting held down under the thumb of these big companies just so they can have like an extra couple of percent of the market. Just for that little bit, they're willing to go to the mat to make that happy. And it's disgraceful. It is a shame. And the things that should be done to these people, it is beyond treason. It is beyond treason. It's not just like we're selling munitions to a country that hates us. We have people who are presiding over our downfall, our destruction, and it's literally like cattle in a pen where we herd them into a corner and we put a gate in front of it and say, too bad, you can't get out. You can only have what I throw in and eat the slop from the bucket. It is absolutely disgraceful, and nobody really thinks about it because that's just the way things are. We go back to the store, go back to McDonald's, we buy it, we eat it. It's not that big of a deal. But the problem is the regulatory environment and the stranglehold that they have on the industry as a whole. And busting up monopolies, that's a necessary thing that would go a really long way to improving a lot of this. Break up some of these big mega companies. And then the other thing where I am willing to go in on, and Lord of the Ree, I think you said this on the last stream, we were talking about making it illegal to gamble with prediction markets and the futures markets. And I'm not a financial wizard by any stretch of the imagination, but I will say that that is one thing that I have come around on. I am more than open to bringing down the hammer of the government on speculation and driving instability in the market, because it's all well and good for a handful of people who make their money not by actually feeding on the commodities, who aren't feeding their animals on the commodities, where they make money if corn goes down, they make money if corn goes up, they make money if gas goes up, they make money if oil goes up, they make money if it goes down. They're not actually invested and genuinely interested in seeing these commodities and the companies that are involved in their production. They're not actually interested in the success of commodity pricing. They just want to make money either way. And you look at Howard Lutnick and the stuff that is supposedly happened with the tariffs, and where the taxpayers are kind of paying off the resolution on those tariffs, but he bet against the tariffs, at least that is allegedly. And so there's gold in them thar hills. And it's the same thing with all the other markets where speculators are lining their pockets as the rest of us literally starve. And it's not like they are investing in something and we require that money to keep the business going, and now I want to bite the hand that feeds me. There's people who are legitimately invested in the failure and the getting screwed that is happening to the general public. It's like, you wouldn't want to have, look at Pete Rose. He got I think they kept him out of the Hall of Fame. I think, did he get in the Hall of Fame? But Pete Rose was basically in the doghouse for decades because of the fact that he bet on a game where he was playing, and he bet on himself. He didn't bet against his team where he would have the ability to throw the game. There's no indication that he was actually doing something subversive to, influence the outcome of the game in a different direction than he normally would when he's playing to win. But he got thrown to the dogs for decades because he did that, and that's dishonest. And yet our entire financial market is set up where people can make absolute piles of money by betting against our country, our dollars, our economy, and everybody who relies on it, which, as it turns out, is quite a lot of us. And that might be something that Matt Walsh should get his shorts in a twist over, instead of some woman who is playing the game within an admittedly lousy system. But again, it's like throwing a party at the beach and getting mad at the seagulls for showing up. The problem is the context and the environment. You put a little effort into fixing some of those things, then you would actually have Americans competing with the jobs. And that's the reason why she's hiring. Like, I can, as somebody who has attempted to hire labor, and those of you that have businesses that, like contractors, I know, like my buddy Andrew, I don't know if he's in here tonight watching, but he always tells me the stories of the characters that he has hired. Another one of my good friends, the guy who helped me put up the grain bin, Kent, like, he has refused to expand his business beyond jobs that he can do by himself, because he said at this point it costs more money and more time and more effort than it is worth for me to try to hire labor. So I'm just going to do it myself. And it's like this self-limiting system where you're not able to expand and build something to pass on to your children, God forbid. And it's something that ultimately you can do barely enough to get by if you're good at it and if you're lucky. And then it dies with you, and we leave nothing to the next generation. And that is something that is really sinister. Really sinister. This system that doesn't just punish us, but it punishes our downline, our children. Because, I can't just pass my farm to my kids. My kids need to also get a job in medicine that will allow them to be able to afford to be a farmer. You see, we can't expand the farm to get to the point where it's supporting itself enough to where I can pass it to the next generation. That is beyond screwed up. That is beyond treason. Like, that's treason at like a multi-generational level. Okay. And I'm not going to go, I'm going to rant here for a little bit, so you guys got to deal with it. You have all of this, people get really wrapped around the axle, and I can't think of any other group to relate this to other than Israel. When you talk about saying Israel doesn't have a right to exist, if you were to theoretically say that, don't strike me dead here, gods of YouTube, please. But like, if you say that, there is just this immense reaction to that, because it's like, how dare you say something so discriminatory to an entire group that goes beyond, like, it's not just saying, hey, I hate you because you are this, that, or the other thing, like call it generic racism, right? It's something that goes further to say that, like, your entire lineage, both upstream and downstream, should be blotted out. Oh, that's right. Trump said that to the Iranian people, didn't he? Not really, I mean, I get shit talking. That's okay. Like, when we're at war with somebody, but I don't know. I mean, that seems a little bit much. But the point is that people really react very strongly when you start saying things that threaten their lineage and try to dispossess their predecessors from everything that they have done. Like, that's beyond, like, treason is like, okay, you're running the country that I'm here and living in, and you're going to sell us out so that our enemies get a foothold and they beat us in this war. That affects me and maybe affects my kids, but it's not like a multi-generational scale of treason and contempt. And you look at what has happened since the 1970s, this has been going on, even the 60s, and you look at how agriculture has gone from being a purely American thing that was as American as apple pie to being something where we have given and sold everything away to big companies that have taken the spoon out of the mouths of small farmers all across the country, and they could not have done one iota of this if they did not have the money and the lobbying groups that were going through the government to make America great again, and we're going to help the farmers, by which that always means there's a couple of farms that are going to be helped and everybody else go kick rocks, but you're small, so your dollars aren't going to affect anything in our election. And that is a multi-generational heresy. It is a multi-generational treason, the likes of which I can't rightly put into words, but when you really start to feel that, it's hard to just calm down and, like, Bohica, bend over, here it comes again, right? Hard to do that. Hard to do that while you have dinguses like Matt Walsh who benefit off of the corporatism and that structure that affords him his Chick-fil-A on his home from being spanked by Ben Shapiro at the Daily Wire studios, so that he can do that and then sit there and have the audacity to turn around and kick a small farmer in the teeth for participating in the very system that he is a part of and that he enjoys, as he goes on to talk about how Chick-fil-A is so much of a better job. Well, yeah, Chick-fil-A is a better job. You're right. Under the current context, that's a problem. Like, if you don't see how that's a problem, go back one step in that equation and think about how Chick-fil-A is able to sell a bunch of cheap food at massive scale and volume, and then that small farmers aren't able to make a buck producing that food. That seems like it's kind of a big deal. That's something that maybe we should focus on. And it's not brain surgery. But anyways, let me hop back in the chat here. Fear Not Farm says, I think if that woman is only running 500 acres and can offer over 30K a year and a place to live, she's running a highly effective farm. Yeah, I actually was thinking along those same lines, like $30,000 a year plus room and board. And again, $30,000 a year, let me just speak from my experience in my region, because I know that a lot of the farms that I drive past and that I interact with here in New Hampshire and Vermont, they have seasonal labor. A lot of it comes from Jamaica and like the Caribbean, although I'm sure some of it comes from Central and South America as well. But they're not here through the winter. They go home and they, hang out and do their own thing over the winter, and they live like kings. They're only here for a portion of the year. So the fact that she's offering $30,000, it's $30,000 a year, but the person is only effectively there and working for maybe 5 to 6 months, because when it's 30 below zero and whiteout conditions, they're not out there picking fruit. So they're free to go and run along, and then they can come back and they can live there. And they wouldn't be able to do that if they had to cover their own housing. They have the in and out where it's quick, painless. Like, they're not having to lose out of that $30,000 that they're making. They're not having to take out of that to pay rent because housing is provided. So they make $30,000 a year that they get to put in their pocket. I don't get to put $30,000 a year in my pocket because I have other overhead costs and yada yada. So yeah, it's not I don't think she's doing a terrible job at that. Bellino's Bounty says, getting good help is a hassle. I see it in veterinary. I work at a family practice, but most of our techs are part-time because the corporate hospitals give better pay and benefits than we can. Yeah, and that's exactly the problem. And I'm not an economist. I don't claim to know how to solve all of these problems. I have some ideas in the world of farming because I'm literally seeing how the sausage gets made. And I could be wrong, which is why I say, hey, present me with better ideas, but there has to be something better than just the Bohica approach of bend over, here it comes again, to like move forward with into a future. And to me, and I hate the fact that I have gotten to a position in my life where I now sound like a Bernie Sanders Democrat, but the reality is it is the big corporations, it is them working hand in hand with the government. And the right wing and the left wing, that whole horseshoe theory, right? They kind of come close together. You go far enough left, far enough right, You wind up in the same spot because it's the big corporations, the big evil corporations, man, we need to get the money out of politics, dude. And then you come all the way to the right and it's like the government is evil and oppressive. And it's like you have these two entities working together and they're screwing everybody in between. And that's a lot of screwing that's happening and it's not okay. Um, and so I think really the sincere opportunity for change exists when we can do something to fragmentize and shatter the big corporations and return market share to small farmers. And here's the thing, I can tell you, based on the fact of how many people that I have buying piglets for me, how many people who want to be butchers, people who want to raise animals, that if there was a way to just manage your pigs a little bit better and to sell it a little bit more effectively, you would have no shortage of American farmers who would be willing to do whatever is necessary and work as many hours. I mean, hello, I work a full-time job. I have kids with parents like out of state. I have like kids with like I have all of these things on my plate and I work my face off to keep this farm going. I would love to be able to build my farm into a profitable business, but it literally cannot happen with the current regulatory environment. I mean, the fact that any of us are farming on any scale or any level is a like last gasp for freedom and what the Constitution stands for and our heritage. It's the last gasp. But this is like, you know, on a ventilator last gasp. This is not just like, oh, I, got a little bit of egg salad down the wrong pipe. Cough, cough, let me clear it up and go about my business. This is like, it's rough. And we should be able to do that. And as long as these big companies are controlling everything, it's not really viable. I think on some level that the opportunity to redirect the market while allowing the big companies to do their own thing and just let them be, redirect the market so that the consumers start choosing differently and start choosing to seek food from local growers. I think that's the best thing that we can do currently to get some momentum going, and then also supporting candidates that are proposing legislation that makes it possible for small farmers to be profitable and to have at least a shot at being profitable. Let me rephrase that. The Prime Act gives small farmers a chance to be profitable. It doesn't make small farmers profitable. I had somebody who made a comment on the video saying that, like, and this is the comment that really set me off, of course, said, I don't think you made any compelling arguments. You're just mad because they don't want to subsidize your way of life and your hobby. I got things that I like to do, but I don't get mad that the government doesn't want to subsidize me. If you can't make money doing it, then too bad for you. And here's the point. I'm not looking for subsidization or subsidies, even though like big ag is all run on subsidies, and that's another conversation for another time. But all of us are looking to be able to have a chance to make money. A chance to make money. Because right now, the regulatory environment, and I will look up the Freedom to Farm Act from the 90s, if you're not farm, that is a good call. I need to do, there's a lot more digging and discussion of this topic that needs to happen, certainly, and I will look into that. But I'm not asking for subsidization to make my product more profitable. I'm asking for a removal of the regulations that make it so that no matter how good, no matter how efficient, no matter how wonderful my product is and my business practices are, that I am never going to be able to make a profit because of the regulatory environment. And removing those and making an equal playing field where we can actually compete with the larger companies, that is very different from asking for subsidies. It's asking for the freedom to be able to compete with the bigger farms because there are a lot more people nowadays who are looking for better quality foods. It's a thing. And it's harder for them to find it because smaller farms are getting run out of business every day. More farms fold. And it's not because they don't like farming. It's not because, oh, you know what, we've done this for 300 years. I'm kind of tired of it. You know what, let's just like go sip Mai Tais on the beach. The reason why these farms are folding is because they are getting squeezed out by cannibalistic business practices, which has been going on for a very, very long time. Okay, back in the chat real quick. Bolino's Bounty says, for the work they have to do, $36K before tax with no retirement plan or healthcare is not viable for most people, especially if they have a family. So, Mike, that is very true if we're talking about an American worker, right? An American worker who has to live on $36,000 a year, put a roof over their head and retirement in the bank, etc. The reason why this works is because that $36,000 that they're making here, if they take that back home to Jamaica, that will pay for housing, pay for healthcare, pay for, I mean, granted, yes, I can't speak to what healthcare is like in Jamaica. I've never been to a hospital there. I'm going to assume that it's a little bit less robust than it is here in the States, but it meets all their needs and then some over there, whereas here in the United States, that $36,000 does not get you a bucket to micturate in. And that is the problem. That last little fact there, that $36,000 a year doesn't go far, that is a much bigger problem than the fact that, oh, they're looking for cheap labor. The question is, well, why is a living wage so high? And then even the people with the living wages can't have any confidence in that living wage because the living wage, that number, those goalposts just keep shifting because there's no stability in the market. It's the factors driving the stability or instability in the market. Those are the bigger fix. It's not that like farmers need to stop hiring people for too little, because the only reason why migrants come over to work is because it fits a need that they have. If you're not farm says it's not whether it's a good wage, it's whether a farm can viably afford to even pay it. Yeah, 36,000 a year seems like a lot to me. I mean, for working on a farm, for seasonal farm labor, $36,000 seems like a pretty hefty amount. I was surprised to see that it was even 30, because Fear Not Farm says, even at record prices in a good year, I would probably net $30,000 profit at most. Lord of the Ree says, I agree with getting money out of politics, but they won't like how. Understood. That's very true. Bolino's Bounty says, but for how long is it going to be viable if she can't get workers? And that's the reason why, right there, that is the reason why it's a snowball that keeps turning over and crushing more and more small businesses, more small farms. And that's the reason why, like, Purdue can afford to build cracker boxes for legal H-2A migrants to come and work at their factories, because they have enough money. And all the people that are buying chicken, again, I'm sure I don't know what she's producing exactly there. I don't know whether it's chicken or, well, regardless what it is, right? Her market share, when they have nowhere else to go, they're going to go to Purdue. They're going to go to JBS. They're going to go to Cargill, because they can overcome that momentum. But it's that momentum of like, how long can she keep paying those kind of wages? Well, she can't. And if you have a climate in which the people and the businesses that feed your population are getting squeezed out, you might want to get out of that coal mine if the canary goes tits up. Instead of, we're all sitting around saying, well, geez, like, how is this canary gonna live? How are we gonna survive down here? The canary's gone. Yeah, that's a good question. We need to get out, right? There needs to be a massive overhaul, and like, there is a penalty to having 10 times as much as we need as soon as we want it, and living in the way that our modern society has gone. We've kind of seen some of that in the tech sector, looking at Apple, and when we have these iPad kids, and how technology has damaged literally the rationality and the brain power of children and adults at this point, who grew up, even like the generation, like my generation, the millennials, I'm 43, like we grew up in front of televisions, and people didn't realize it. But then it's like, you get down the road a little bit and you see everybody is on SSRIs and all kinds of drugs, and they can't think straight, and there's this, that, and the other thing. And it's like, maybe we've been going in the wrong direction for like the last 50, 60 years, and we should have just quit while we were ahead, like around 1900. Like, we have some motorized technology, we have good railroads, we have lights, flush plumbing. Like, maybe we could just leave it at that and not try to do like the AI for everything. It wouldn't hurt for people to just go outside and work in a field and dig ditches, and people to know that they could have a future digging ditches if they have a strong back and they want to do that. And now, like, you can't even get high schoolers to work on a farm because there is no career in farming. Like, what are you going to do? Do HR for Purdue Chicken or Tyson? Like, come on. There is no future because they certainly are not going to be able to take the land that mom and dad are going to leave them. Like, I can't, like I was saying earlier, I can't even pass my farm on to my son and hand him a farm that's running and that's operational, and he can say, yes, this is going to be my career. I'm going to run this efficiently with everything that my dad is giving me, and I'm going to make it work. We cannot do that. He still needs to have a career. And so, yeah, he's going to go for Chick-fil-A and then try to look for something that puts him more in line with whatever industry that he chooses to make a living wage in, because a living wage does not exist for farmers. A living wage exists for people in the corporate management structure of farms, but for the farmers who keep those systems supplied, those are done with land and machinery and businesses that have been operational for a very long time and got kind of sucked into the mechanism of the industrial agriculture system, and now it's spit out, and now it produces slop, give or take. I mean, I know that's a little bit of a not very charitable position on things, but that's kind of what's been going on. But when you look at smaller farmers, there's no place for them. You can't get there from here. Fear Not Farm says in 1988, hog farms that consisted of 1,000 head or less made up 32% of hog operations. Throughout the 90s, it started out that 7% of operations were huge, like 50,000 or more. Big operations grew, the price fell out from under hogs. Somewhere in the 90s, big operations made up over 50%. Entry level teachers in Oklahoma make 49,000. I like how I've been in a career for 12 years, have doubled my wages and some, and then some, and my dollar's worth about the same as when I got into the career. I make about 60,000 a year, and Matt Walsh is making fun of a farmer who's trying to pay out 36,000 a year and offer living quarters. Yeah, and we are not all millionaires. And to be fair, like, you look at what she's constructing for them, it's not a shack. You want to see a shack? Look at the stuff that I build. Okay, if it's made out of pallets and like baling twine, then maybe you could call it a shack, but it's literally providing housing. And this, like, the irony that, again, coming back to this point, this is how those chicken nuggets that you buy for your kids without thinking twice, that's where they came from. They came from cracker box housing paid for by Tyson or Purdue, and you got no problem with that. You just like finding somebody that you can bag on and try to redirect the narrative to being about, illegal immigration bad, because that's the narrative to get, that's the whiz bang that's going to get all the MAGA people wrapped around the axle, because they need to be reminded that it's not really our foreign aid, our support for a foreign war that is absolutely gutting our economy, and the most vulnerable percentage and people in our economy are getting gutted by this absolute travesty that's going on for the benefit of who, I don't know. Maybe it is benefiting some Americans who like are trading on commodity futures, but not the people who are feeding their animals and their families with commodities. Those people are not benefiting at all. Those people are taking it in the shorts. But the people who are trading on the, they'll make money even if we go out of business and we lose. Those people are making money. To me, that's not a good deal. That's not a good deal at all. People need to understand that that is all wrapped up in the discussion of, making farming great again and making, doing good stuff for the farmers and all that stuff. It's not, you've been fed a lie, and it's easier to fool people than it is to convince people that they have been fooled. Let me wrap this up here and finish up.
Could be, but it probably isn't. And it's not something that most people are especially passionate about. So you take the job that pays more in that case. Now, how much is this woman willing to pay? And I looked this up. The starting full-time wage at Chick-fil-A, just for example, is usually like $16 an hour. So that's more, or at best, basically the same as what this woman wants to pay for farm laborers. But Chick-fil-A, also in the listing, it says that it requires 2 to 5 years of experience. Now, so that's the problem here, is you're not paying a fair wage. And you can find low-skilled third world workers who don't even speak English and have no other prospects and can't do anything else. And yeah, they'll take that job.
Okay, I got to put my oar in the water about this because we've already kind of run the gamut there with, what she's paying or whether that's a good living wage or not. But this characterization of somebody who's willing to take the job or these, derelict, no options, good for nothing, no skilled morons that don't even speak English. Let me tell you, I have worked around plenty of migrant workers. Again, not on my farm, but on other farms that I have had contact with, and having experience like knowing how to operate and work on heavy equipment, which is a big part of those jobs. It's not just somebody who's putting fruit in a basket, being able to use heavy equipment, operate it, knowing the farm, knowing the layout of the farm, knowing how the sausage gets made within a farm so that somebody can come in. Menial labor is not unnecessary. It's not shameful. It's not something for low skilled. Like, you want people who are imbeciles to be doing these kind of jobs? No, it actually matters. The thing is that for most people, the operation in that kind of an environment, that kind of a job, is not worth it for them to learn those skills. Experience makes a really, really, really big difference, because when I have to bring somebody onto my farm and I have to train them how to feed the pigs and where they go and what you should and shouldn't do, like you're doing for a high school kid that's going to work for you for a couple of months, but that they're going to need to go when your busiest season in the fall, when like harvest is coming in, they're going back to school and maybe they'll help you on the weekends, but pretty much they're like, see ya, I got my spending money for the summer, I'm out of here. Like, you need to have somebody who's going to be able to bring in the crop, bring in the harvest, because all of your bet goes up front. So all the farmers who are not buying fertilizer this year, and we'll see how that works out for everybody once we get a little further down the way, but you invest all of this money up front to plant crops, to buy fertilizer, to buy seed, to make sure that the equipment's ready to go. You want to make sure that you have good people who are capable. Like, the people who are coming into farms to work as migrant workers, they have made a career of doing this. This is not their first time. These are not the people from the Leering Center in Minnesota. These are not the people who are living, that hopped the border and are living in hotels paid for by Zoran Mamdani in New York City. These are people who are legitimate experts in their field, which, again, if you think it's that easy, Matt, get off your keister and go out there and do it yourself and take a little bit of time. I would love to open my door here and give you an internship at Rowan Ridge Farm, which I know it's kind of just rhetorical to say that because I know he's never going to do it. But I would love to show you all of the things that there is to learn about how to be good at doing farm labor, because when you're hiring somebody to pick fruit, you're not just hiring them to pick fruit, you're also hiring them to operate the machinery and hook up the wagons and disconnect everything and take care of the machinery, do all of that stuff. There's a lot baked into that cake. There's a lot that goes into it. It's not just, I need some dingus with an IQ around room temperature to sit there and just pull stuff off and stick it in a bag and have a nice day. Like, there's a lot more to it. And this is one of the reasons why it's so infuriating to see somebody diminish the value of that. Like there is, and look, I am not a fan of illegal immigration, and I think that immigration, just because you call it legal, doesn't make it better for our culture and our society. But at the same time, there is a massive difference between migrants who are experts in their field of agriculture and what they're doing. They're, just because it's a low skilled, because you're not out there using a smartphone or programming C++ into a computer to set up a website, it's low skilled, but I promise you, it's not a job that just any bozo can walk in and do. And so, yeah, having that experience at a reasonable price that a farmer can afford, yeah, that makes a really big difference. And that's not something to turn your nose up at. And there's a big difference between these migrants that are coming in, that are providing valuable services and that are experts in what they're doing, and the people that are just here to leech off of the system and sign up for EBT and SNAP benefits and screwing the taxpayers. I have seen plenty of these migrant workers. They are men, good health, middle age. They come up, work for a few months. They're happy to come here. They're happy to work. They're happy to go home. They're not coming here to sit in the hospital and get paid for by Medicaid. Like, that's not what this group of people is actually doing, and it's misrepresenting things to imply that that's what's happening. And furthermore, again, to my larger original point, I look forward to, and I am all in favor of having an environment in which we don't have attractive options to supply to immigrants to come in and do this work. But the point is that immigrants have been doing this labor since the 1920s, and even before that in the 1800s. Cheap labor has always been, and migrant work has always been a thing. This is not a new thing, and you're not going to get rid of all of it. But if you create an environment in which the American worker can compete through doing agricultural jobs, then you have the opportunity to cut down significantly on both legal and illegal immigration, and you strengthen our culture and you strengthen our communities, and national security is strengthened because we're able to produce more of our food, and we even improve our health as a country. Look how easy.
For them, it's a lot of money. And that's why you want those workers here. But that's not a sympathetic story for Americans. And look, I'm on the record many times saying that I think the minimum wage is a retarded concept. The government arbitrarily mandating a living wage, quote unquote, is ridiculous and counterproductive. But I still think people should be paid a fair and decent wage. I think that they should be paid that. I don't want bureaucrats mandating it, because that creates far more problems than it solves, in my view.
Muted. So Mike was muted there. Well,
But in this case, I'm not calling on the government to force this woman to pay her workers a decent wage. She can pay whatever she wants. What I'm saying is that she has the option to pay a decent wage, and then she'll be able to attract workers. So I believe that companies should be able to pay whatever they want, and then you can choose to take the job or not. But they should be required to only choose from a pool of actual American citizens. And within that pool, as far as what the wage is, well, that the market determines that.
okay, yeah. As I said earlier, sorry, I muted the mic. Going back and forth is a little tricky. I'm one-man operation here. I need to hire some illegal immigrants to help me run the show. Matt, if you know any that I could possibly get to work here, maybe you could let me know. That would be great. In addition to all the farming chores that I need help with. But seriously, the issue is that we're participating in a global economy. And the bigger the companies are servicing bigger areas, both in our country and even abroad, then it's a global market, it's a global economy. And so, yeah, you're going to hire people that are from over there, just in the same way that, Matt Walsh wouldn't have a problem with the fact that a lot of meat cutting operations and meat cutting, um, you know, processing plants, one of the things that they do is they partner with prisons to take convicts, to have the convicts, basically people who, literally what he is saying, people who have no skills and no options and are destitute and are the dregs of society, literally people who get spit out of the prison industrial complex. They siphon them up and they suck them in because they're legal, but they'll work for next to nothing, and they're not really in a good position to be picky, because how many places can you go where they say, hey, I just did 10 years in prison for knifing somebody. You go to the butcher shop and they're like, great, fantastic. What kind of knife was it? How did you, was it, what was the situation? Right? Or you can have a rap sheet for all kinds of untoward behavior. And hey, you're cutting up carcasses in a butcher shop. Nobody cares. They don't care. They will employ people who are, addicted to various substances, all these different things that would be frowned upon in a part of society where you could expect to get, like, you can't come to a hospital after committing a felony and being incarcerated for 10 years, but you absolutely can go cut chicken for Purdue or Tyson with that kind of a record, and nobody will give a rat's and nobody will care. They won't care at all. And so that's sort of, it's baked into that cake. You got to have some cheap labor somewhere, and I don't know that having that guy who comes out of prison with a felony, that's so much better than having somebody who comes from another country for a few months to make a little money and off they go. The problem is, why is this necessary? Why is this the case? And it comes down to uncomfortable stuff that, again, nobody wants to confront the elephant in the room, which is the value of the dollar sucks, and the regulatory nonsense that is plaguing our businesses in this country is also, it only serves the massive corporations and protects them from small operators who could put a dent in their profit, and nobody wants to talk about that.
But you can't really talk about how the market determines the wage if that is a fair concept. If we're talking about America and Americans, in that context, the market determines the wage. But if the context is the entire world, and now you have Americans who have to compete for even these kinds of jobs with the entire third world and people who will take any job, well, that's obviously not fair.
And once again, just to point out, nobody was competing for these jobs. That's exactly the point. It isn't fair. I agree with you, Matt. It's not fair because Americans are not competing for these jobs. The people who will gladly do the jobs are people that you just don't want to be here because you don't like how it reflects on our culture and our system. Whereas if we were to deregulate, you bust up the monopolies so that we have smaller companies, smaller farms. And I don't know exactly, I'll be very candid about this, I don't have an exact blueprint of how to deconstruct the system in a way that actually makes sense and is beneficial. But it's something that a couple of smart business heads who actually had a little integrity could figure out pretty reasonably how to deconstruct things and return things to local American economies. You do that, and I'd be behind you 100%. And you say, no more immigrants, legal or otherwise, hire Americans, and that's it. But when you have global players that are controlling so much of the market, we're playing in a global economy. Who are you to tell people that they can't hire people from other companies or other countries? It's like nobody's telling the big tech companies when they bring in, couple 100,000 Indian workers to work the high paying jobs that Americans actually are competing for. Nobody's, you know, Trump himself is going to bat for those types of operations that are very obviously screwing American workers. But then if you say anything about it, then you have Trump derangement syndrome. So
And look, if she doesn't want to do that, if the only option that she wants is to hire foreign slave labor, well, then guess what? Your farm doesn't deserve to exist. I mean, it's that simple, really. If you can't keep your operation running by paying Americans a fair wage, then your operation should not exist. Whatever.
okay, I think I've had enough of Matt Walsh, and I'm assuming that you guys probably have as well. So I am going to dispense with that. We can kind of land the plane here because he doesn't really say anything else. Ultimately, he's unwilling to confront the realities of the system and deal with the system that creates a need for immigration and low skilled and low paid workers. And until we're ready to change that, the system isn't going to change. In the meantime, having people who are willing to farm at a scale that they can do so without losing their ass, but effectively do it in a way where they're building, kind of like getting up to that starting line so that we could theoretically scale at some point. If the environment changes enough to make it doable, then I'm all for that. And I think that in the meantime, we got to do everything that we can to get in the game. That's my position on that. Northern Lightfoot says he's talking out of both sides. I agree, of course. Fear Not Farm says if you did the vertical lives, you get more people in here, but you need to make a few admins before you go vertical. So I have this set up where it's a dually. It's both vertical and horizontal. I don't know, kind of, there's a lot that I'm learning about OBS, and I'm not sure about the chat, whether it's showing me the vertical or whether it's showing me the vertical or whether it's showing me the other one. So I got to figure some of that stuff out, but I should have both going at the same time. I don't know how to get chats from the vertical as opposed to the sane, rational people here in the horizontal, because I know the vertical live streams always bring in the real characters, and that would probably at least be more entertaining in terms of some of the discussions we could have. So that's something I got to research. I appreciate you guys being patient with me, though, trying out this new adaptation and doing some reaction videos. I will probably do more of these in the future. I'll try to get a little bit faster and be more concise. Northern Lightfoot says, I will preface with I hate AI, but this week I used it to create a request for proposal for a very, very big company for a very specialized skill set. Took maybe 2 minutes to say what I wanted. What popped out was damn near perfect. Changed only a few words and sent it. Pretty soon we'll all be taking very low wage jobs. Glad I'm old. Well, I mean, the way and maybe we'll do maybe the next live stream next week, we'll talk a little bit about AI and some of this stuff. Personally, my view with that is the more reliant the world gets on technology and things like AI, I think the more susceptible it becomes to failures that will ultimately put those of us who have real world skills like building things, growing things, producing things, all of the things that 50 years ago were just, normal. It's going to put us in a position of high desirability, assuming, and this is a big assumption, assuming that there's enough security, law, and order to just keep us from getting overrun by the mustachioed hordes that come in from, whatever city, and the hipsters come in and take all of our stuff because they just overwhelm us with pure numbers. beyond what our magazine capacity can prevent. So that's something to think about. But yeah, I use a ton of AI for just making thumbnails, because I can put in a couple of pictures and then create an image that tells the story and is clickable and all of that. Some of the things that I'm doing, I'm going to make very, like, people can tell the difference, and so I'm going to have some things and do a little bit of A/B testing with some of that. But I think there's, yeah, I mean, AI, it has its benefits, but I would gladly give up AI and make my own thumbnails the old-fashioned way, in order to, kind of take our society back to, let's say, late 1980s, early 1990s. I think we had a pretty good balance, and it was like we should have quit while we were ahead, and instead just kept our foot on the gas, and there you go. So anyways, folks, I am going to conclude tonight's live stream. I really appreciate you guys being so patient. If you haven't already, like, subscribe, and those of you who are interested in supporting what we're doing, you can always do that. Our memberships are open. We have 7 members now, which is huge for us, and that allows us to keep doing what we're doing. Guys, look forward to more discussions with you all. If you guys have things that you want me to kick around, I'd be happy to do some of that, and maybe I'll put out the call for moderators here, if anybody is interested in moderating, and then maybe we could put a little bit more effort into bringing some newer eyeballs into this stuff with the folks from the vertically oriented live streams, and see what comes out of that. But everybody, I really appreciate your time, really appreciate your support. Thank you for liking and participating in what we're doing and spending your time with us. Thank you guys for support, all the members, Northern Lightfoot, Secret Noise Pictures, Zeb, Kiko, my wife, Myra, and let's see, who else is there? I know there's a few others. I want to thank everybody by name, because GeoGasser, Red Sky Responder are two newest supporters here. Really appreciate all you guys helping us do this and make this possible. And we are going to wrap things here, and we will catch you guys all on the next one. And yeah, it's an interesting discussion there. Just lastly, Northern Lightfoot, half of YouTube is AI. Matt's going to be replaced. No way he can keep up to date and create content worth watching. I think on some level it's going to be like more desirable to have old-fashioned content that's a little bit slower. It's just like, I watch the Three Stooges with my kids because it's fun. I think it's the same idea with AI. I think that there's still going to be people that want to watch black and white television, and I think that's kind of where we are with a lot of this stuff. So, all right, folks, good night. Appreciate your time, your help, your support, and look forward to seeing you guys as we move along. This has been fun. Thanks. Good night.